Buy a paper doll that I can call.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call the regular monthly meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to order for Wednesday, August 26, 2015. And if you'd all rise for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McGill, would you call roll, please?
Chair Wiscombe.
Here.
Rincon. Here. Cavazos. Here. Clark. Here. Heaton. Here. Longstreet. Here. And French is not yet present.
Okay, great. And we have a new commissioner to welcome, Mr. Cavazos. Welcome to the Parks and Recreation Commission. We're very happy to have you here. And would you like to say a few words?
Well, I was told there would be prizes or a fruit basket, but no, great to be here. I know a lot of you from some of the other commissions, and Nancy Rapp, who asked me to join and then ditched us all.
Right.
But very happy to be here. Very, very proud to be.
Great. Well, we are happy to have you. And if you have any questions or anything, just make sure you reach out to us. So I'm sure you'll be fine. Oh. Okay. Ms. Zachary, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. Seeing as none. And no written communications. So we're going to move on to public comment. Is anyone here to comment on an item that is not on the agenda today? Okay. Seeing no one, we will close public comment. We don't have a youth council report. So we're going to move on to commissioner committee assignment reports, and we'll just go down the row. Nothing. Okay. Ms. Longstreet?
I attended the Park Foundation this month and the NAC. I am now serving as the chair of the NAC, and we had a very good meeting about the funding projects coming up in the future.
Thank you.
I had a fabulous vacation.
Okay. Mr. Rincon, do you have anything to report?
I, too, went to the NAC where we received a report on the LED light retrofit that's happening on the east side, so that was very interesting. And then also we had this special joint meeting with the Creeks Advisory Committee, and so just reporting on that.
Oh, your mic's not on. Yeah. Do you want to
repeat?
Yeah.
Okay. Neighborhood Advisory Committee, I was present for that, and there I saw a presentation on the LED light, street light retrofit that's happening on the east side. And then we had a special joint meeting with the Creeks Advisory Committee where we saw some property considerations for property acquisition.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. I had kind of a busy month. Ms. Longstreet and I both attended the City Council meeting to speak on behalf of the Commission's support of Option A for the Muni Golf Course. On August 6th, I attended the regular monthly meeting of Street Tree Advisory Committee. Mr. Downey reported on enforcements. There's one new one, and one new case opened and one closed. And we reviewed and made site visits to the trees on your agenda today. And on Saturday, August 8th, Ms. Longstreet didn't mention it, but we had the pleasure of being the greeters at the VIP section of the Children's Parade for Fiesta, and that was a great, yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
we had a good time.
It was a lot of fun. So, always my favorite part of Fiesta. On August 12th, we had a special meeting of the Street Tree Advisory Committee to further review some additional information on 1187 Coast Village Road, and the applicant brought several consultants to the meeting. So we'll probably hear from them today. Also on the 12th, I attended the Golf Advisory Committee meeting. Rounds for July 2015 exceeded July 2014 by 2%. but they were lower than budgeted by about 8%. And total paid rounds for FY 2015 were 2% higher than FY 2014, but revenue was down by 1%, and it was due basically to two factors. First of all, rewards card sales are 33% lower than they were in FY 14. And two, the mix of golfers has changed. The higher paying adults declined while the lower paying youth increased. On the 19th, attended the regular meeting of Park Foundation and also the joint meeting that the Commission and Creeks Advisory Committee had. And then on the 20th, I attended the Planning Commission meeting on behalf of the Commission to support issuance of a coastal development permit and front setback modification for the Cabrillo Bathhouse and Pavilion, which staff was successful in procuring, and congratulations for that. So that concludes that report, and we'll move on to Commission and staff communications. Do you have anything, Ms. Eckery? Okay, well, we do. Jim, could you pass that down this way? Thank you. And Ms. Longstreet and I have just a little something that we'd like to do for Carla McGill, who is retiring, effective. When is second? Fourth, okay. So, we're going to ask you to, yeah. We know you don't like this, Carla, so we'll keep it.
I hope so.
You want to say something about Carla?
I would just like to say that I've had the privilege of working with Carla. She always keeps us on track. She gives us accurate information. She keeps us going the direction we need to go all the time, and always cheerfully. She just is wonderful to work with. I can't say enough about how much she has kind of just kept all the balls in the air when we have so many things, and the meetings go smoothly, and she's just a wonder to work with and will be truly missed.
And I can't say it any better than what Bibi said. A remarkable woman in many, many ways, and always there no matter what. And I'd just like to say a special thanks to you for not retiring before Nancy did, because all heck would have broken loose if you had. So we appreciate your waiting the extra month. But you will be greatly missed, Carla, and you've been a pleasure to work with and have a lot of respect and love for you. And this is a little card for you from the Commission, and a little birdie told us that you might like that as a little gift from us. So, yeah. You want to say anything else?
Thank you very much. I didn't expect this. I'm going to actually start crying. It's kind of like reality now, since this is my last meeting and next week is my last week. But I'd like to say that the City of Santa Barbara and the Parks and Recreation Department in general is an excellent organization to work for. I appreciate Richard Johns giving me the opportunity that he gave me in working for the department. I have really loved working here. And if I lived in Santa Barbara, I probably wouldn't be retiring right now. But I want to say that the city organization, they hire well, they treat their employees excellent, and it's just a fabulous organization to work for. I have enjoyed working with each one of you over the years, some of you for many more years than others, and I will miss everyone. So thank you for the recognition.
Okay, great. We're going to move on to the consent calendar, summary of council actions. Ms. Zachary, did you have anything to add to those? Does anyone on the commission have any questions? They're in your packet. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from the regular monthly meeting on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, one abstention from Mr. Cavazos. Okay. And they carry. And we're on to Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Mr. Downey, welcome. And if I can just say briefly, because I know a number of you are here on the Coast Village Road item. So the way this will work is Mr. Downey will give a brief introduction, and then we open it up to the commission for any questions, not comments, but just questions, and then we open it up for public comment where you're welcome to come up to the podium and speak. We generally like to allow 2 minutes for each public speaker. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the first item is 136 San Rafael Avenue. This item was at the commission meeting last month. The applicant brought in additional information. The commission voted to send it back to Street Tree Advisory Committee for their opportunity to review the additional information, and they did so. The applicant had provided additional documentation of tree branch failures and provided some additional information about the underground utilities. The tree has damaged the gas line, the water line, the sewer line, all of which have since been repaired. The committee felt strongly that the evidence of the frequent branch failures on this tree and the growth pattern in the tree being more rapid than other trees on the site were sufficient justification to remove the tree. Their recommendation is to approve the removal on the condition that a designated street tree is planted as a replacement at a location to be determined by park staff. I do have some of the photographs that he provided if you'd like to see them, but I didn't want to waste the time if you didn't need to.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Do we have any, are you speaking on this item, Mr. Svensson? No?
You approve it or not?
Well, if you are speaking, you speak before it goes back to the commission for discussion and a vote. Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that you understand the process here. So, fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have no public comment on this item, so I'm opening it up to the commission for any questions, discussion, and or motion.
Madam Chair, just a quick question. So when we're doing a tree replacement, are we taking into consideration native trees? Do they get precedent? That type of thing. I think the urban forest is a great concept, but, we live in a desert and, it's kind of hard to maintain these trees, and then you get into a drought situation. So when we're recommending these things, do we factor that in overall?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Cavazos, the municipal code gives us direction about the street trees to be planted. Each street or section of street has a designated street tree that the municipal code requires that species be planted when we're planting trees. That is, as you'll see in your tenure here, something that there's a process to go through changes. Certainly, when those changes come through, all relevant species are considered, drought tolerant or not, depending on the situation. And there are opportunities to make changes to that designation. At present, the current designation is the same species of tree.
I would move that we concur with the street tree recommendation for the removal and replacement at 136 San Rafael Avenue.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Great. So we're moving on now to 3B1, which is 3616 San Pablo Lane. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 3616 San Pablo Lane has a large chamois ash tree. It is located just a few feet from the home. There are cracks in the foundation. The stairway leading up to the front door is also damaged by the tree roots. The committee evaluated the request and looked at the damage that had occurred. Their recommendation is to approve the removal on the condition that a replacement tree is planted in the setback that can achieve a height of 30 feet, hopefully farther away from the home.
Okay, thank you. And there's no public comment on this item, so I'm opening it up to the commission for discussion and a motion. Yes. Questions? Yes. Ms. Longstreet.
Well, I'd make a motion that we concur with the street tree recommendation at 3616 San Pablo Lane for removal and replacement.
Who seconded that? I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Cavazzo seconded it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on item 3C1, which is 419 Calle Alamo. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, at 419 Calle Alamo, the applicant is requesting to remove 3 of the 4 trees in the front setback. The tree in the right photo closest to the roll-off is causing significant damage to the driveway entrance, and they're concerned that root pruning might destabilize the tree. The tree in the middle of the picture on the right side is a cook pine that they feel is crowding the tree behind it. And then the tree in the picture on the left is an Aleppo pine. That tree is also causing damage to the adjacent driveway. They have concerns about pine cones and branches that might drop on the neighbor's property and their cars. The Street Advisory Committee reviewed the materials, went out to the site, and they determined that both the Aleppo pine adjacent to the neighbor's driveway and the California pepper adjacent to their own driveway could be pruned to mitigate for branches or the weight of the tree. In fact, they commented that, in their opinion, they both needed some service, and that any repairs to the driveway very possibly could be accomplished without removal of the tree. The cook pine in the middle of the property is crowding the tree somewhat, and their recommendation is to approve that one. Their further comments were that if the other 2 trees on the other sides, each side of the one that the applicant wants to save, were removed, that tree would be exposed too much to the elements, and with its growth pattern having grown very tall and rapidly to try and reach for light, those new wind patterns would likely cause additional branch breakage. So they're actually protecting that middle tree. So their recommendation is to approve the removal of the cook pine and deny the removal of the other 2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. We do not have any public comment on this item, so it's back to the commission for questions, discussion, and a motion. Anyone have questions? Yes, Ms.
Just
Clark?
A couple comments.
So you said that the cook pine is somewhat crowding the tree behind it. Is the tree behind it suffering any ill effects at this time from the crowding, or is it just a visual crowding?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, this is the cook pine here in the middle. The tree, the removal of this tree, the committee felt would provide additional light to the tree that's behind it, and that would benefit that tree that they wanted to retain by its removal. The other two, the Aleppo pine over here and the California pepper, their removal would actually be a detriment to that third tree. So they felt that removal of this tree would be a benefit to an adjacent tree.
I had the feeling when I went and I was looking at it that it looks, this Next Generation Capital, is that a company that buys that foreclosed home, gets them, and then resells them at a higher price? Because it looks like they're gutting the property to fix it up and sell it. And the cook pine looks beautiful. It is not visually appealing. There's not a lot of curbside appeal when you look at that. So my question was whether we're going to allow Next Generation Capital to remove part of our street tree or setback tree inventory to turn a profit, and I didn't like.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, the committee determined that the removal of the one pine was a benefit to the other tree and would not be a significant impact to the neighborhood because we do have 3 remaining trees to provide that benefit to the community. I don't know who's involved in the property right now, so I couldn't comment on that.
Madam Chair, if we take out the middle tree, or were to allow that, then do the other 2 on this report, do they benefit, start growing, expedite further damage, and then they're back, 6 months from now, trying to get those other 2 removed?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Cavazos, the most benefit that would be received would be for the middle tree. The other 2 do have significant access to light currently, so it really isn't impeding them by shading them in any way. The trees do need some maintenance, and staff will have conversations with the applicants about that. But they do provide a good value to the community, and the committee felt that the removal of the one tree would have a benefit to that middle tree and allow it to fill in better. If at a later time circumstances change, they certainly can reapply for removal of other trees. This is not necessarily a permanent decision.
Anyone else?
One more quick question. How is it determined that they should remove the cook pine instead of the tree behind it that's crowded?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, the applicant is not requesting to remove the tree behind it. They want to retain that tree. And the committee, since it wasn't part of the application, it's not really in their jurisdiction. They could recommend to the applicant, comment to the applicant that they would suggest removing that one instead. But it was my impression that they felt that it was a good, strong specimen and should be retained.
Anyone else? Okay.
I would make a motion. I move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for 419 Calle El Amo for the removal of the cook pine.
Do I hear a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Rincon. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? I didn't see. Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 3C2, which is 1187 Coast Village Road. We have a number of speakers on this item. So for any of you who came in late, Mr. Downey will give his presentation, and we'll open it up to the commission just for any questions, and then open it up for public comment, and we generally give 2 minutes per speaker. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 87 Coast Village Road is in the process of upgrading the property. They're attempting to provide additional dining space for some of the tenants of the facility and better access through the facility. The tree on the right over here is at the west end of the property, and then the two trees on the left here are on the east end of the property. They're proposing to remove all three trees. Their proposal also includes 3 replacement trees being proposed. The committee determined that the tree on the west, the tree here in the right picture, can be preserved with alternate construction methods while retaining the design of the stairway proposed for that area. If the applicant were to provide pedestals to support the staircase as opposed to a full foundation, they can still achieve the staircase they desire and retain the tree. The applicants have agreed to explore those alternative measures for that one. The two trees on the left, there's several things that are impacting those trees for this project. Their desire is to put decking out at that location within the area where the trees are to provide for some dining space for the adjacent tenant. The ABR has reviewed this, and they have approved the decking on the condition that the applicant receives approval for the removal of the trees. Additional to that, the ABR has asked them to move a small wall at the front of the property back from the sidewalk, approximately 18 inches. That construction would require some tree root removal and pruning. They also are planning to regrade the driveway. Right now it's very steep, the driveway, and frequently people use it as a pedestrian access even though it's a driveway. Their plan is to level that out as best they can, which also requires grading and tree root pruning on that side of the tree. And then lastly, there is a second level that is below street level for this facility, and there is a retaining wall that holds the soil back for this planter to allow access for pedestrians to go between the businesses there. That retaining wall is damaged by the tree roots of the tree on the right in the left photo. The committee evaluated that. They looked at the situation and they determined that the tree on the right on the east end here, this tree, with some careful excavation could be retained, and the other tree, if the other tree was removed. The committee's recommendation is to approve the removal of the tree closest to the driveway and deny the other 2 trees. Staff evaluated the situation. The tree on the right in the left photo here has 2 trunks, and where they connect is a known defect in trees. As the trees grow, eventually one of those trunks can split out, and they're very large and can cause quite a bit of damage. The committee felt that the tree could be cabled to help retain it a while longer. Staff determined that between the root excavation on 3 sides of both of these trees and the defect, and if the tree closest to the driveway is removed, there would be new wind and weather patterns affecting the remaining tree that it didn't have before because the other tree was protecting it, would put new influences on the tree that it didn't have before. And when you add the defect and the extent of the root pruning, and that new exposure, staff is recommending that the tree to the west in the right photo be denied, but both trees adjacent to the driveway be approved for removal.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the commission for any questions you have for Mr. Downey. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Yes, Ms. French, and then Mr. Heaton.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. This is a new image I hadn't seen before, and just for clarification, these trees at the backside of the open decking, which I assume is the new decking, those would stay where they are. These are not the trees in question, correct? Thanks.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, I believe those are the trees that are being proposed as replacement trees.
Right. That's my understanding too. Yeah, they're the brachychitons. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Heaton.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. You may have covered this pretty much in your description from staff's recommendation, but specifically, I guess, in your professional opinion, do the principles of good forestry management indicate that the interior most eastern tree should be removed if the tree adjacent to it is removed?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, excuse me. Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, it is my opinion that if the tree closest to the driveway is removed, the influences of new wind patterns on the tree, coupled with the defect in the tree, will cause branches to fail in this tree, and it should be removed.
One other question. On the western tree, one of the attachment letters from an agent for the owner, I believe, said that more than 50% of the tree root would be impacted, and that would destabilize the tree. Did you evaluate that, look at the percentage of, or did the committee, percentage of the impacts, and have any comment on that?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioners, the tree, both trees have roots throughout that planter, and the excavation of the new driveway, the footings for the replacement of moving the front wall back, and the repair of the retaining wall at the back of these trees would require root pruning on 3 sides of these trees. So it would impact both trees.
I'm sorry, I may have been confusing. Western, eastern, most western. I think we're talking about the tree that's recommended to remain.
The tree on the western end, through a different design for the foundations, essentially you can install pylons as opposed to a full foundation to sever all the roots. It would only be roots in a few places as opposed to complete severing the roots, and that tree can be retained.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
When I was out there today, that driveway, there's quite a bit of root damage in that driveway, isn't there? It's extensive all the way across.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioners, that's true. There is damage to the existing driveway for quite a few number of feet all the way across.
Okay, and the height of the replacement trees, what's there?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioners, they're proposing a 36-inch box replacement tree. For the trees on the east end, there's one tree proposed over there. Because of the decking, they've arranged the decking in such a way that they've created a space for it while they can still have the decking there. So there's room for one tree there. That a 36-inch box typically can be up to 15 feet tall.
And what's its growth pattern? How tall will that get?
It can achieve the height of the current trees.
Okay. And as we go through this process with this alternate pilings on the other end to save that other tree, who makes that decision, and how does that affect what happens next?
Chairwoman and Commissioner Longstreet, the applicant has agreed to keep me in the loop on when they move forward with the project to review any root pruning for any trees to remain and determine whether it would destabilize the tree at construction time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Okay, I will open it up for public comment, and as I said, we have a number of speakers. The first one is Heidi Jones. Welcome. If you'd come up to the podium and make sure that, mic's at your mouth level, and then Ms. Jones will be followed by Charlene Little.
Good afternoon. My name is Heidi Jones. I'm the agent for the owner, and I'm an employee at Suzanne Elledge Planning and Permitting Services. The renderings that I handed out to you, I really just wanted to give you an idea of the improvements that are happening at this shopping center. It's under new ownership. They're doing a lot of various tenant improvements, the dining decks, column replacements, remodel work, the driveway improvements that we talked about, alterations, landscaping, really giving it, revitalizing and refreshing this somewhat outdated building. So just wanted to give you that visual of the big picture, what we're trying to achieve, and really to improve the function, aesthetics, address structural issues, and enhance the streetscape connectivity at this site. Our current request, was to remove 3 Canary Island pines, and we have decided that we no longer want to remove the most western tree, that we think we can proceed with alternative construction footing methods and careful observation by the city arborist during construction and retain that tree. We are in agreement with staff's recommendation to go ahead and request removal for the 2 eastern trees, and there's several reasons we feel that's a reasonable request, mostly having to do with the encroachment of the critical root zone from the civil work that needs to be done, the existing damage in the driveway, the new retaining wall that will need to be put in that area, and the safety hazard that's there with the driveway. As Tim mentioned, it is used as a walkway. There's a big change in elevation from the street side to the lower floor. It creates some drainage damage with the current proposal. A lot of that drainage flow and pattern will be able to be remedied in that area. Again, ABR requested we push back that existing lower wall 18 inches further back, so really squishing those 2 existing trees. And again, we have the new deck in that location, so we'd like to move forward with requesting that removal. Our landscape palette, we do have some overall removal for this site. It's about 1,000 square feet. We are planning to install 3 times that amount with our project, so it will be greened up. Includes a good mix of palm trees and architectural plants, regular trees, shade and screen trees, as well as ground covers. It's a water-wise planting palette, and the proposed replacement tree, the flame tree, is more water efficient than these pine trees are, so that's good in the current drought condition. We have our project team here, our civil engineer, our design team, and our landscape architect, if you have any questions, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that. Okay, Ms. Little, you will be followed by Claudia Sobel.
I'm Charlene Little, and I appreciate the chance to comment. I live on Seamelinda Lane in Santa Barbara, which is close enough proximity to this Coast Village shopping area that I do frequent the area. And I'm here to let you know how much we do appreciate our trees. They are very special to us, especially in this time of the climate warming, and sidewalks can be very hot to walk on, and we just love the shade of a tree, and also for the visual effects, because our trees so often are disappearing. It's one of the main attractions to Santa Barbara that brings people here. And so when we have a large tree that's already been nurtured to have that much growth, it seems a shame to remove any that don't have to be removed. So I hope you will give all of that your consideration, and that any trees that can be saved will. If it takes some cabling, I think it's worth it. If it takes particular protection of the roots, I think that's worth it too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Ms. Sobel, welcome. And Robert Kuhlman? Yeah, you'll be next. Thank you.
First of all, I didn't get to ask a question. For replacement trees, how long would it take? You said it would be about the same height as what is there now. How many years would that take?
Do you want to answer that, Mr. Downey, or? Okay.
I will.
Yeah, I mean, normally this is when you get a chance to speak. And,
No, I raised my hand, but nobody saw me.
Yeah, but we don't do dialogue. So,
Okay.
But,
I can leave it out.
yeah, so, but go ahead.
Chairwoman, Commissioners, the replacement tree is a species that can last 75 to 100 years. It would likely have its mature height around 60 years down the road.
Thank you. Also, hearing the replacement that you said, and you said pine, no, you said...
Can you address the commission,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, basically, these are mature trees that have been well established. They have some problems, as we heard, but I'm in favor of doing whatever is necessary to keep them going as long as possible, and also fix other problems, because they are very magnificent, beautiful shade trees, very inviting to the community. And I think that that cutting them down would be a very big mistake aesthetically, and perhaps even environmentally, because of the global warming trend. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it. Mr. Kuhn? And be followed by our final speaker, Cindy Feinberg.
Yes, Commission, thank you. My name's Rob Koyman. I'm the president of Meridian Group Real Estate Management. I manage several buildings along Coast Village Road, including 1187. I just wanted to note that my company and the ownership support the staff recommendation, and managing several buildings on Coast Village, we're very excited about the prospects of getting this project underway and the beautification efforts that will take place at 1187. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Final speaker, Cindy Feinberg, welcome.
Thank you. Commission, Madam Chairman. I'm just here to speak two things. I'm current president of the Montecito Association, and this has just currently come to our attention. So I'm speaking generally on behalf of the association, although we haven't voted on the specific issue, so I just wanted to make that clear. But in regards to Montecito, and I know you're city versus county, so it's not technically our jurisdiction, but as we all know, it's Montecito, Coast Village Road. So we work in partnership for, I think, the benefit of our entire community. And really what I wanted to speak about is, of course, I think we're well aware that Montecito is very concerned about maintaining the semi-rural character of our community. And so whenever trees are taken down, et cetera, it's of some concern. Of course, we understand sometimes that needs to be done for the health of the tree, the health of the community, et cetera. In this particular instance, I do support the recommendation that the tree be preserved with the right proper casing. It's very it's aesthetically important to Coast Village Road. And I think all of us have been on Coast Village Road, and whatever we can maintain there, what we really don't want to happen in Montecito is to become another strip mall. And so if you take down all the trees, I think that's what happens. So aesthetically, it is important to maintain whatever trees that we can. As far as the trees near the driveway, I do certainly understand the issue with the roots. If possible, I think it would be great to see if we could maintain that one tree. I know there's speculation that conditions may affect that tree, but again, that's speculation. I'm not sure the cost involved, though, if we were to take one tree and leave the other tree. So that is something that I would just encourage you to consider and to possibly look into. So just in summary, I just would encourage all of you to remember to do your best, if you could, to help protect the aesthetics of Coast Village Road. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes public comment, and it's back to the commission for any further questions and discussion. Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
I would just say that today I did review the ABR meeting where this was discussed. And they obviously had trouble, as we would have trouble with the tree removal, but they were in favor of the landscape plan, and I think it was still being fleshed out a little bit when this happened. As I visited today, I was also concerned with how close those are to the building, and there was talk of the damage to the building also, which I think we haven't talked about here. I would be in favor. I'm so happy that the tree on the right, I can't do the east and west thing. The tree on the right is being saved and not in question at this point. That makes a huge difference, because the other two, I could really see the damage that had happened, and I think when we take information from the experts, it's not speculation. When our city arborist speaks about the health and condition of a tree, I do listen, and with all that construction and all the root pruning, I just don't see how those trees would maintain safe and stable life.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments? Mr. Cavazos?
So you're recommending one replacement tree for the two? Is there a reason why there couldn't be two replacement trees?
Chair Westcombe, Commissioner Cavazos, the space that's available with the deck design will only accommodate one tree. If you look at the piece, the document that the applicant provided today to you, it shows how the decking comes out towards the street front there. And the decking would actually encompass the trunks of the existing trees. So the space that's available would be behind that, a little lower down the driveway. So it's only space really for one tree on that side.
Anyone else have any comments? Ms. Clark?
I just wanted to say that I did appreciate what Charlene had to say about the maturity and the height and the shade that the trees provide and how important they are to our community. And then I forgot your name. Oh, no, I'm sorry, Claudia, the woman behind you that spoke last. You had some concerns about homogenizing Montecito and making it look like a strip mall. When I did visit today, I noticed that particular part, that shopping center, already does kind of look like a strip mall. And when you look at the rendering and the deck, this is something unique and special that we don't see in Montecito right now. So I don't think it's moving towards strip mall. I think it's moving away from it. But thank you for speaking.
Okay. Anyone else? I will absolutely support staff's recommendation for the removal of both those trees. I mean, I was at both the trees on the east side and retention of the tree on the west side, to make it clear. I was at both the Street Tree Advisory Committee meetings. I think that this solution, I was pleased that the applicant was willing to very quickly from meeting number 1 to meeting number 2 say we'll accommodate the one on the west side, the one on the right side of the picture for those of us who are East and West Challenge. But it is a reasonable development of property. I think listening to the project engineer talk about the retaining or the wall being moved back, and right now there is really very minimal footing for that wall, and that's going to have to be changed. I think we're severely going to, as much as I hate to see a mature tree come down, I think we're going to severely impact the root system of the tree on the furthest from the driveway by if it were left. And I think what we call the double leader on the tree was, and the implications of removing the one next to the driveway and not removing that, as Mr. Downey had talked about, really falls under, safety category. So I think between the reasonable development of the property, which is certainly a code in our code, and also safety issues, which are in our code, I think, and I guess I'd go so far as to say, best practices for urban forest management in terms of, you don't want to compromise one by removing the other. So I absolutely support staff's recommendation. So anyone else have anything? Yes, Mr. Heaton?
Just one question as I'm looking kind of back through the material. On the original application, it did note that there would be 3 34-inch box flame trees as part of the replacement. So I'm wondering if there's another location that they were proposing one of those, or the second tree to go.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Heaton, the original plan was to replace with one tree on the east end where there is currently 2 trees, and 2 trees on the west end where there's currently 1 tree. One of those replacement trees would have been where the existing tree is. So they are exploring whether it would be feasible at construction time to put the second replacement tree on that end, depending on how many tree roots would have to be cut to do that.
Anyone else? Would anyone like to make a motion? Well, I'll move that.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Why not? I'm on a roll tonight. I move that we concur with the staff recommendation at 1187 Coast Village Road to remove 2 Canary Island pines on the east end and retain the pine on the west end.
Second that.
And replace with
one brachychiton.
One brachychiton. That's right.
Okay, and Ms. Clark, you seconded that motion. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Did I see ayes all the way down this end too? Okay, great. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to, and thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your coming to speak. It's very important for us to hear your thoughts. So. We're on to agenda item number 4, which is a history of trees in 5 of Santa Barbara's oldest parks. Oh. And we have Ms. Burgess and Ms. Worth here, right? Yeah, right. Welcome.
Chair Wiscombe, members of the Commission, I'll just do a quick introduction. We're bringing this to you as an information item. Some of you were involved in the Commission when we went through the process of developing our urban forest management plan. Some of you were in neck deep working on our technical advisory committee. Thank you very much. Council approved that plan in April of 2014. Although we have no dedicated funding for implementation of the plan, we have been moving forward with research, analysis, and beginning to put together some more of the building blocks for when we do have longer-term implementation funding. Alina Worth is hired by our department, I believe in February of this year, to work on a variety of different things, and this project sort of rose to the surface as a high priority because we really started thinking about our historic parks, our oldest parks, where we have some very majestic trees where under today's conditions, considering the severe drought, we're concerned about their welfare. And as we delved into it more and more, Alina began to focus on 5 of those parks because, as the Commission is also well aware, in addition to caring for our urban forest and planning for its future, we're looking at our parks in different ways today and identifying the feasibility of perhaps changing uses in parks. Sometimes that might involve determining whether that can happen due to the trees that are there. So with that said, we thought we'd bring this to you as an information item and get your feedback and give Alina the opportunity to present her research. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zachary, Chair Wiscombe, and Commissioners. My name is Alina Worth, as she said. And so, yes, I'll be giving a presentation on a history of the 5 parks that I did research on. And so our original intent for this project was to better understand the historical intent and vision of some of our oldest city parks. So we took a look at East and West Alameda Plazas, Upper and Lower Orpit Parks, Plaza Del Mar, Plaza Veracruz, and Mission Historical Park. We wanted to develop a timeline of tree plantings and removals and get a better understanding of how tree varieties have changed through time. And this would eventually help us to create a database of knowledge to inform the development of future tree planting plans. And this also ties in, as Jill is saying, to help support some of those objectives in the Urban Forest Management Plan. This is not an exhaustive list, but it would help to maintain the existing species diversity and look at methods for increasing species that we might want to add to some of our parks, as well as protecting and further enhancing the trees that are in these parks. Understanding this horticultural heritage is very important because not only are these trees important assets to our current parks, but they provide a link to Santa Barbara's past, to the time and place and people that came before us. And they also reflect a very diverse range of tree species and age diversity, which was completely intentional by the horticulturalists that first developed these parks. And finally, understanding our horticultural heritage really is a way for us to further connect the community with these parks and provide us with educational opportunities for them. In order to amass all of this knowledge, I visited the libraries at Santa Barbara Botanical Garden, the Santa Barbara Historical Society, and the University of Santa Barbara, as well as referenced some hard copy files at the Parks and Recreation Department, and that was mainly just old Park Commission meeting minutes. And then to get a better understanding of the current inventory in the parks, I consulted our tree inventory database. And then along with the city arborist, I conducted site visits to each of the city parks. So first, I took a look at East and West Alameda Plazas. And this area has always been an open space, being an open plaza on the first city maps in 1853. And as you can see from these aerials, even by 1938, there was already a very mature stand in these plazas. And looking at the 2015 aerial, the design and the intent of Alameda Plazas seems to have carried through. The canopy cover is very similar in most areas, and so that made us believe that many of these trees that are there today could possibly have been planted by Dr. Doremus. So he originally started management of the parks in 1902 of East and West Alameda Plazas, and he used that area as his own nursery, part of it, where he would propagate certain exotic species. So the diversity really began very early. And a lot of those species that he propagated in the plazas were planted in East and West Alameda Plazas, as well as elsewhere in Santa Barbara's urban forest. And some of these exotics that were planted include the northern rata from New Zealand, and he also planted a black acacia from Australia. Both of these trees that Dr. Doremus planted in the parks no longer exist. The one on the left, the northern rata, actually no longer exists anywhere in Santa Barbara's public urban forest, and the black acacia exists elsewhere in Santa Barbara's urban forest. So this just kind of gives you an idea of some of the information that we were able to gather by looking at these histories of trees. As you can see, over the past few decades, tree varieties in Alameda Plazas has decreased, while the total number of trees has increased. And a lot of the tree species that have been introduced are palm species. And after looking through all the documents and visiting East and West Alameda Plaza, about 15% of the trees were original plantings. And here you can't see the actual names of the trees, but these are the general locations of those original plantings. And some of those include the coast redwood on the left, which was planted in 1919, and the fern pine from Kenya, which was planted in 1908. Next, I looked at Upper and Lower Orpit Parks. They were purchased with the help of the Riviera Company, which was a resident company put together to purchase these lands. And so in 1919, they were successful, and Mr. Orpit, throughout the 1920s, used this as his experimental area where he introduced a lot of exotics as well. And so even more so than the Alameda Plazas, this area boasts numerous unique species, 16 unique tree species to the Orpit Parks, one of them being the gum myrtle. And they also have numerous trees that were planted by Mr. Orpit in the early 1920s, and these are a few of them called out. Along Alameda Padre Serra, which is the road bisecting them, there are coast live oak trees, and that were planted originally by Mr. Orpit, but they're not within the park, so they're not called out here on the map. And then I took a look at Plaza Del Mar, which became a city plaza in 1900, and the original Los Baños Del Mar bathhouse, which is pictured here, was built in 1901. And as this postcard kind of depicts, it was really a bustling epicenter for the city at the time. It was the terminus of the streetcar line. It was a popular picnic spot. But by 1966, it was all but forgotten by most of the residents. And the original plantings of the park proved difficult for Dr. Doremus because it has historically been an alkali swamp. So in order to plant it, he originally proposed having a Dutch-inspired windmill actually pump out the water, but that never was put into action. So instead, they just filled it to grade level. He introduced a few Montezuma bald cypress trees as well as a few other tree species. And today there are 75 trees in the plaza, representing 19 different tree species. 45 of those are palm trees. And almost half of the trees in Plaza Del Mar are original plantings, and many of those are the Canary Island date palms. So you can see them lining, I'll use the mouse again, lining Castillo Street and then along the walkway within the park. And then Plaza Veracruz, similar to Alameda Plaza, appeared as open space on the first city map in 1853. There aren't a lot of historical records of tree plantings within the plaza, but the first public playground was built there in 1905, and shade trees were built surrounding that area to help shade the area. And today there are 41 trees in the plaza, representing 17 different tree species, but none of these tree species are unique to the plazas or rarely found within Santa Barbara. Some of these trees, the older trees that are there, include the Mexican fan palm, a Yate tree, a Senegal date palm, and the Montezuma cypress. And lastly, I took a look at Santa Barbara Historical Park. This is a shot of the mission in 1880, but the it wasn't a city-owned park until 1938, and which was when the grassy area and the rose garden was obtained, and then in 1948, the ruins adjacent to it were added on. And so this is a shot of Mission Historical Park today, and it gives you a good sense of the number of trees that have been added not only to Mission Historical Park, but to the rest of Santa Barbara as well. And this is an aerial image of the park. So since it's not as old as some of the other plazas, there weren't original plantings dating back to the 1900s. So instead, so this shows you kind of the location within these riparian areas and the native oak woodlands. And so here there's about 189 trees in the park. In this area, it's mainly coast live oak trees and the California pepper tree. And then up here are some olive trees. And these tree species represent 75% of the trees in the park. And these olive trees were actually planted just after World War I in remembrance of that. And so this was just to give you a sense of, rather than being a spot for exotic tree species, it more blends in with the natural habitat in that area. So in conclusion, as we saw, East and West Alameda Plazas and Upper and Lower Orpit Parks really do have an extensive horticultural heritage, and they were intended to be these worldly arboretums where a visitor would come and be transported through time. And as such, there are a large number of species that are unique to the parks and rarely found in Santa Barbara. And so this understanding will help to further put into action some of the objectives of the Urban Forest Management Plan, and just more effectively put those into place, as well as maintaining the knowledge that these were areas and still are valuable locations for public and private events, especially Alameda Plazas being the home to Earth Day and Solstice Festival and such. And Plaza Del Mar and Plaza Veracruz and Mission Historical Park, while they were never intended to be these worldly arboretums, they do have old trees, as we saw, but their significance really lies in the public's ability to use this space, especially Plaza Del Mar. And so looking at these sites as possible sites for increasing species diversity that we have either lost, or fortifying species diversity is an option, as well as I said, with Mission Historical Park, really blending in with that local environment. So these are options. Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. Really great. Does anyone have questions or comments from the commission? Ms. Longstreet?
Excellent information, and really helps to put the history of our parks in perspective. I would like to encourage it to be shared with different departments. The Historic Landmarks Commission, I think, would really enjoy all this work that you've done, and I think it should be more out in the public. So thank you very much. It also really helps us to look at what we need to do to keep our parks alive. They're living places, and trees have a lifespan, and we do need a focus on replacing some of these and figuring a way to explain what we're doing to the public with replanting of a certain species for the diversity.
Okay. Mr. Rincon?
Yeah, great report. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I'd like to get this narrative out into the public if we can. I don't know how. Maybe working with maybe a web page with a narrative that goes along with it. But I think the public would really enjoy this narrative and being explained, because trees, of course, are so important to us here in the city, and having this history presented for general consumption would be of value. Thank you.
Ms. Clark?
I also really thoroughly enjoyed that. And the I got so excited when I was reading it, and I wished I knew it before. I had a way to tell my kids about it. And then you mentioned a lot about educational outreach. And I did notice that City Council just earmarked funding for that Hunt Company to go ahead with a comprehensive sign program. And I was wondering if you're already considering incorporating interpretive signage regarding these historic trees and fascinating stories into our parks.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Clark, and all of the commissioners, your comments are exactly what we're on the cusp of doing. You get the benefit of being the first public opportunity for us to present the work that Alina has done. We do plan to share this with Historic Landmarks Commission. It's one of our efforts as we address historic parks and historic trees to share that with them. We've done that with all of the other reports you've received, whether it's the Franceschi flame tree or the stone pines on Anapamu. And then as far as education and outreach, that is another objective. It's one of the plan. It's one that we want to pursue. Our sign program does include accommodating interpretive signs in our parks. It's interesting that you make that comment about the Alamedas, because we actually have a sign that we intend to put in there, and it's really, really difficult to put on a sign how to go to a specific tree to learn more about it. So, and as Chair Wiscombe knows, we've grappled with, should we have a mobile web application or an app or something like that. Now that the city has updated its website, we do have a mobile use of it, and as we begin to sort of find ways to put this information there, people will be able to access it. All of that takes time and resources, so our first step is do the research, but your comments are very well received.
Okay, anyone else? Ms. French?
I just want to take the opportunity to echo the Commission's sentiments. It was an excellent report, and I really appreciate you, Ms. Zachary, with the foresight, the staff's foresight to get this started and inform us of this effort. Thank you.
Great. I have a couple comments. Being part of the, whatever we call the technical something committee for the urban forest management plan, diversity has always been a top priority and is a top priority in the plan. And so this goes a long way to species and age diversity. And I was really interested in the number. It's just by the 70s, East and West Alameda plazas boasted a total of 112 unique tree varieties. That's declined to 82 today. So that's 27%. And that's a big, big number. So I think there's a real opportunity here to do what several of my fellow commissioners have said, and that's make education and outreach, I think, a top priority. And with species and age diversity as priorities, and that's pretty clear. I had one question, and it's more kind of personal. Is the gum myrtle, is that in Lower Orpet?
Yes, that is.
Is that big, huge tree? We have one in the city, and that's it, and it blooms, and it's just awesome.
And it's right to the right of the staircase.
Yes, okay. I know where that is. That's an awesome tree. Everyone ought to go see that when it blooms, because it's really something. So, yeah, but thank you very much, Ms. Worth. It was a great report, and Ms. Burgess, as always. It was a great report, and there's so much information in here that, and I imagine it was kind of fun digging through. I mean, you really, you have missing links, and you have to dig through a lot of different data at different places and different types of data to look at things, photographs, and yeah, so it's really well put together. Thank you so much.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner, if I could just add, we only included one attachment, so there is a longer report for each one of those parks, but we didn't want to produce too much paper. But that information is something that we will also make available, more detailed. We gave you the one for East and West Alameda Plazas. There is a more detailed report for each of the 5 parks. And now, of course, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Oh, now I do remember. One of the things I kept asking Alina, how do we know it's original? Do we have the records? And there aren't great records. And so they're not bad, but it reminds us that keeping record of what we do in our public spaces, whether it's trees, buildings, any other improvement, helps us understand where we came from and also helps us figure out where we should be going as a result of what we decided then and maybe whether we make the similar decision today or perhaps take a different one. So it's reminded us, document and find a way to document it so you can find it after you've documented it.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Downey. We are moving on to agenda item number 5, which is advisory committee liaison appointments. We do this generally twice a year, usually, and we have a new commissioner, and I don't, is there anyone on the commission that would like to switch to something else? Of our, no? Okay. So, Mr. Cavazos, we have right now vacant the Youth Council liaison position. Is that a schedule that you might be able to accommodate? I know your schedule is such that you don't know your schedule, until it tells you what it is, but.
What is their regular meeting?
Their regular meetings are the first and third Mondays of the month at 5:15 p.m., and it's usually in the Davis Center.
And are they done before Monday Night Football is over? Or
Yes.
Mondays are usually pretty easy to work with. So.
Is that something that you would be willing to take on, do you think?
Sure.
You would? Okay. That's great. Okay. So we've got that. And then the other change that we're making is to the Park and Recreation Community Foundation, PARC. I'm on the board, Ms. Clark's on the board, and Mr. Cavazos is on the board. So I would like, we usually have 2 liaisons from the commission. So since Ms. Clark has been on the board longer, I'd like you to be the other liaison with me. Okay, is that good? Okay, and then Mr. Cavazos, you will remain on the board because Ms. Longstreet submitted her resignation from the board today. So sad but true. So
I will stay involved.
Yes, you will. If I will. I'll be banging your door. I know where you are.
I detect a threat.
I'll hunt you down. No. Okay. So do we have any other? I think we've covered everything, right? Okay. So that takes care of that. And then if there's meetings that you can't make for Youth Council, that's fine, but it meets twice a month, so hopefully you'll be able to. And I think we'll have to coordinate that with Susan Young to make sure that you get on the list, because sometimes they meet here. So, Pardon? Okay, Carla will take care of that. Okay, great. Good. Okay. Now we're moving on to agenda item number 6, which is the Recreational Trails Program grant application for the Douglas Family Preserve Trails Restoration Project. And we have a couple speakers on the issue. So we'll hear a presentation, then we'll open it up to the commission for any questions, and then it'll be open it up for public comment, and you'll have 2 minutes at the podium to speak on the item. And then it'll be back to the commission since this is an action item. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Fry.
Chair Wiscombe, members of the commission, we're bringing this to you because it's a unique opportunity, not something that we've actually really had in recent history for the Douglas Family Preserve. Many of you probably remember the time when it was acquired and then transferred to the city. And at that time, it came with an endowment, which is held by the Park Foundation. For a number of years, the city did receive a small amount of money from the Park Foundation, the endowment, for maintenance. And then those funds went away for quite some time when the economy took a bit of a turn. We've recently been able to receive some of those funds again, and so we're looking at opportunities to address areas that have been left unmanaged for a very long period of time. We, in the last fiscal year, spent some of our operating funds to actually go back and remap all the vegetation in the park, as well as relook at the trail system. We inherited a trail system that had been created by users before it came to the city, and that trail system has changed over time. There are many user-created trails. We also have activities in the preserve that sometimes aren't as positive as we would like them to be. The State Parks Recreational Trails Program is actually funding that comes through the federal government. When we learned that there was this unique opportunity for funding, we realized that we might be in a position to secure some of that, to essentially address the existing trails, not all of them, a portion of them, to try to make them more sustainable. Because we've done some recent work, we believe we're in a good position to secure these funds. We're bringing it to the Commission in part because this type of project is in the capital program. It's not something that we said we would prioritize in this fiscal year, as you may recall, because we never thought there would be funding. But it shows how when there's an opportunity that arises, we may be able to pursue a project like this. If this, our application is due next month, as with any other granting agency, it usually takes 12 months at best for the funds actually to become available. Plus, work that we would do there would be timed to avoid bird nesting season, would also be timed to be outside of dry weather. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of wet weather, because doing trail work when it's too dry is not necessarily a good way to go. So we'd be looking at probably fall of 2016 if we were successful in securing the grant. We are having a neighborhood meeting on site tomorrow, and Ms. Fry may mention that as well in her presentation, to walk through what our objectives are. We're designing the project to fit within the grant guidelines, but also achieve some necessary improvements at the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Welcome, Ms. Fry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Parks Division is here for this presentation today, and our request includes that the Commission recommend that the Parks and Recreation Department submit a grant application to the Recreational Trails Program excuse me, for the Douglas Family Preserves Trail Restoration Project. As Ms. Zachary stated, the Recreational Trails Program is a state-administered program with funds from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Federal Highway Administration. And the Federal Highway Administration recently released $11 million to the Recreational Trails Program, or the RTP. That's outside of the normal timeline. It's usually released once a year, earlier in the year. And so applications are fast-tracked, with the application due on September 15th of this year. So that's given us less than 2 months to complete this work. The department is preparing the Recreational Trails Program application package to rehabilitate and renovate the trails at the 70-acre Douglas Family Preserve open space park. The Trust for Public Land transferred the property to the preserve, the preserve property to the city in 1997, and with that transfer came 3 miles of trails with no trail program, no trail plan system. They were basically the remnants of the leftover nursery and oil roads and trails. They consist of dirt roads and trails, degraded asphalt, and informal trails or paths through the property. In the past 18 years, they've been very well used, and they are in need of maintenance now. They've become compacted, eroded, and widened. The proposed project will rehabilitate and renovate 1.7 miles at the preserve. This will reduce trail erosion, improve safety and access, and it will foster restoration of native habitats. In the attached aerial here, you see the renovation of 1 mile of universal access will be taken care of along this green line through the park. And universal access is basically an accessible path for a wheelchair. Also associated with universal access, a few informal paths in this area here will be formalized to create this loop at the northwest corner. And will also provide signage to distinguish this 1 mile of path from the remaining 2 miles in the park. Also within the park, these green lines here represent where the eroded and degraded asphalt is, and that's about 0.7 miles in the park, and we'd be removing that also. We would request grant funding to do that. The universal access route starts at the Medcliff entrance and traverses through the park to provide a unique and diverse view of the park, of the preserve. It goes around a Coast live oak woodland, which is probably the most mesic or cool area within the park, and the diverse habitat in the Coast live oak woodlands provides an opportunity for bird watching. And then the user can either traverse the park to this point and turn around, move forward and make this loop, go back to the entrance, or they can continue on for the full 1 mile loop, and that will actually take the user out to the northwest point of the property, which is probably one of the most scenic and iconic places in the preserve. It provides views of the coastline. You can see Ealing's Park across the street, and you can also see the San Ynez Mountains from that viewpoint. There are sensitive resources on the preserve, one of those being the Coast live oak woodland in the center of the preserve on the mesa. And then also the top of Bluff. And just to orient you, this is the preserve around the Mesa neighborhood. This is Arroyo Burro Creek with Arroyo Burro Beach over here in the Pacific Ocean. The top of Bluff is a red line illustrated on this topographic map, and that is considered a sensitive resource. Also, a sensitive resource associated with the bluff is a 50-foot setback from that bluff, and also a 40-foot setback that is the 75-year cliff retreat, or an area of potential erosion in the future, long term. So those are sensitive resources on site, and the project has been designed to have minimal impacts, to avoid impacts to those sensitive resources. That would be achieved by limiting the amount and the location of ground disturbance, by working within the existing trail corridors on site, and by directing the universal access away from the bluff. So we have planned and designed, preliminary design for the project does not go along the outer loop trail, but instead we've shifted it in to the inner middle loop trail. So it provides a diversity of habitats and also avoids those sensitive resources along the bluff. The portion in the northwestern corner is pushed back far enough that it's outside of the 50-foot setback. We'll also be using sustainable trail practices with this project, and that will help to improve drainage, prevent erosion, and it'll also provide longevity for the universal access trail by preventing erosion on that trail or flooding, pooling. The total cost of the project is estimated to be $365,000, and the department will be requesting $300,000 in grant funding. The grant guidelines require at least a 12% match to that $300,000 request, and we will provide matching funds through the 2016 Parks and Recreation Community Foundation disbursement of $30,000 from the Douglas Family Preserve Endowment Fund, and then also the remainder of that from in-kind staff support to manage and implement the project. On August 11th, 2015, just this month, the City Council adopted a resolution approving the application for the Recreational Trails Program grant funds. And tomorrow, Thursday, August 27th at 5:30 p.m., we will be having a community meeting on site, and we'll be discussing the project with the neighboring residents. And in closing, the Douglas Family Preserve trail restoration has been an unfunded priority for many years, and a successful grant application will support the department's management and maintenance of the preserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fry. Okay, this is an action item, so it's back to the commission for discussion. There is a staff recommendation, and oh, I'm sorry, we do have public speakers. I'm very sorry. I apologize. I really do. I apologize. Thank you very much for reminding me. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Just a couple quick questions. With the asphalt removal, what happens there? Does it just remain dirt, or is that going to be restored as well? Or
With the Commissioner Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Cavazos, sorry. The asphalt will be removed, and there'll be a slight amount of evening off that trail surface. It will go back to a dirt trail surface, and the asphalt that's being removed will be shredded off-site, ground, and recycled.
and then if you apply for the grant and you don't get the grant, then no harm, no foul.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, yes. If the funding is not approved, we're not in a position to move forward with this project.
Anyone else? Yes, Ms. French?
So I've spent lots of time on the Douglas Family Preserve, and I know how much people spend time on the bluff's edge looking at the view. So I appreciate the moving the universal access trail away from that. I do know that there'll continue to be usage by probably foot traffic, but other dogs and whatnot along the coastal bluff. So a couple of questions have to do with fencing, safety aspects, any other, I know this is all according to budget, but is there a grand plan that might encompass some of those things long term? This is opportunistic, is how you're sort of setting it up, so universal access is the priority, I assume.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioners, there is no fencing proposed for this project, and I do not know of any fencing proposed in the near or distant future for the preserve. There are limitations by the Coastal Commission about fencing along the coast. The only fencing that there is right now is really gates at the entryways and along some of the property lines. And then we have the southern side is a bluff, and the northern side is the coastal oak woodlands and the trail that goes down that. The universal access trail will be 5 feet wide, and currently a lot of the trail access where it's proposed is 10 feet wide. So someone in a wheelchair would be able to traverse the trail, the universal access area, and a dog could run alongside, or someone else could walk with them, or other uses could occur at the same time while they're on the trail. And yes, the outer loop trail is well used along the bluff, and people will still continue to be able to use that. We don't have any plans for that right now. The area in blue that you see up here, that is not the outer loop trail. That is a trail in between the outer loop, which is right adjacent to the bluff, and this is the middle loop right here, and that's where the universal access will go. This is another road or trail along the inner portion here, and that's where the asphalt will be removed.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner French, if I could ask Ms. Fry to actually use the mouse to show where the Coastal Bluff outer loop trail is. It's very difficult to see this in this aerial. One of the reasons why we aren't addressing that right now is, first of all, I should step back and say our capital program calls for developing a full-scale restoration, habitat restoration management plan for the preserve. We have a master plan in place that already guides the decision making that we can make there. We know we need to address the coastal bluff erosion at some point. In order to move something like that forward, we'd have to do a lot more analysis and technical studies, apply for a coastal development permit, and address the effects of sea level rise and coastal bluff erosion into that. That's a topic that I think is something that we would spend a number of years looking at and also having a community discussion about, because people do very much value the ability to walk in that location. We do, at some point in the future, need to plan for it may not be there in its current configuration. We do have significant erosion already today. Some of that has to do with the way the bluff is used by park users and dogs that are off leash. In an ideal world, we would have less bluff erosion and be able to revegetate those areas. That kind of project is of a scope and a scale that's far beyond our ability at this time. We're focusing on the universal access component in part because the preserve is not that accessible right now. The city does have an objective to make all of its public areas more accessible to all members of the public, whether it's physical accessibility, economic accessibility, social accessibility. And we have some wonderful environments in the interior of the preserve, just like the coast area. I would add, and perhaps Ms. Fry, if the Commission's interested, could talk about what does it mean when we're doing this trail work. We are not going to be putting in a concrete path, for example. The management plan, calls up pretty specifically the type of materials that we will use. You won't even know necessarily. You will know that it's different because it'll be flatter. We have quite a bit of rutting, quite a bit of erosion, but it's not going to look like an urban trail in a park, in a developed park, like Shoreline Park, for example.
That was actually one of my questions. What is the surface of the trail?
The surface,
Proposed surface.
Commissioner Wiscombe, commissioners, the surface of the trail will be DG or an aggregate, decomposed granite or some type of aggregate with the specific sieve size required. And then we've actually found a binder that is made out of organic material. It is the hulls of a seed, and it will help to hold that decomposed granite or aggregate together. And in order to create a stable base, we'll dig down less than a foot and put other aggregate at the base, and then compact that, and then put the decomposed granite on top of that. And there is a requirement for the Federal Access Board, who oversees the universal access, that requires a firm and stable surface. And this stabilizer, it's actually called stabilizer, the material, and the DG together have been tested and have provided that firm and stable surface.
So they are ADA accessible, is
Yes.
what you're saying. Okay, great. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're fine. Anyone else have any questions? One more question here. Okay, Mr. Rincon.
In terms of fire access, would the fire department conceivably use the same universal access lane?
Chair Wiscombe and commissioners, we would this is a preliminary design right now. We will be talking with the fire department, but what probably will happen is that the fire equipment will probably straddle the universal access area. That way they will not have to be riding over it, but their tires can be on either side of it since it's only 5 feet wide.
Yeah, it wouldn't be wide enough for, yeah, it was only 5 feet, yeah. Okay, anyone else? Okay, fine. So it's to public comment now. So we have 2 speakers. First speaker is Mr. Wayne Norris, followed by Mr. Steve Crosby. And if you just come up to the podium here and give you 2 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you very much. I started going to Wilcox about 3 times a week, and I call it the Wilcox. It's very hard for me to get that out of my vocabulary. 1978, so if you do the math, that's 5,100 times, and feel like it's a wonderful place. And not just myself, but I think everyone else loves it, just the way it is. There is actually a notion enshrined in federal law known as arrested decay. The town of Bodie, California, which is actually part of a national park, is being maintained that way. By now, since it became essentially Santa Barbara property, 2 generations of little boys and girls have been sneaking around there in the little user-established trails, which vary from time to time in the way that user-established trails all over the world do with small animals and small humans. And that's a big part of their memory. There is a plan to get rid of those trails. That wasn't mentioned here, but that was in the public documents that I read in Newshawk this morning. I just have to say that I don't think anybody in the neighborhood is interested really in changing anything. There's asphalt. That's right. There certainly is. There's actually a well-respected branch of archaeology, recent archaeology, that deals exactly with things like that. Clearly, if you use archaeology, you're going back to ancient temples, but there is modern, there's modern archaeology in which the remnants of recent memory, that is to say, people still alive or people who are recently passed on, can recall. I don't see that there's a mandate. There's talk about safety. I've never heard of anyone falling off the cliff or getting hurt. It's really difficult to fall off the cliff and actually do a long fall. You'd probably tumble about 8 or 9 feet and end up being embarrassed because it's hardly a straight drop. And again, I'm not alone. What's wrong with it? And I've been through planning sessions like this at the Pentagon more than I care to tell you. In fact, I got to go to another one here as soon as this is done. Just a defense one. But I think I just heard a proposal to create Tom Sawyer's Island. But that's not what we want. It's just great the way it is. I don't think you can do a thing to make it better. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Steve Crosby, welcome.
Thank you for your for your listening. My wife and I own the house that adjoins the Medcliff entrance. My daughter, her husband, and their 2 elementary age kids, girls, live in the house right now. Those of you who were around when the planning of the preserve and opening it to off-leash dogs was being discussed, the neighbors had a lot of difficulty and problems with the plan, mainly because of they were concerned about the additional noise, calling dogs, people gathering next to the houses, about dust from the preserve. It comes over our house in clouds from dogs running along those dry trails, and traffic and parking. All of in response to that, the city, in consideration of the neighbors, said, okay, we will close this park at sunset or at dark. Never happened. no fencing to close it with, and no enforcement whatsoever. It's a party time for local teenagers and camping ground for the homeless at night. They said one of the biggies was, again, to protect some privacy and noise from the neighbors, is that the trail that goes right behind our houses, that was going to be no dogs, just pedestrians. And they did put up signage for that. I don't know if that's a problem or not, but this is directly in opposition to what we were told was going to happen at that preserve. You don't have more neighbors here, because I only heard about this meeting about 2 hours ago. Our daughter, who lives right next to that entrance, got no notice, and we who own the property also got no notice. I just heard about it accidentally, word of mouth from my daughter, who said, look at Newshawk and read about it. That's why I'm here. I think enough said. We were also told that not to worry about traffic and parking, because the main entrance was going to be at the east end of Henry's Beach, where there's plenty of parking and no impact on the neighborhood. In fact, that never happened. The street in front of our house, I have to clean it up myself whenever I notice that there's a break in the parking. The street sweeper can't get through there, because that Selrose Lane is completely impacted by the Douglas Preserve and also by the Mesa Steps just a couple blocks down the road. So traffic and parking are a big problem, and here we're, again, contrary to what we were told. Now the main entrance is being recommended as at the end of Mesa Lane, right in front of our house, rather than from the Henry's Beach, which what we were told was going to happen.
Okay, I have to ask you to wind up, please.
Okay. That's it. If we have some money to spend on the preserve, I would recommend using some for fencing, so that the existing code can be enforced, and rangers to enforce it.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for coming and commenting. We appreciate it. I'm closing public comment, and it's back to the commission. Again, it's an action item. There's a recommendation before us, so I'm opening it up to the commission for discussion. Ms. Longstreet?
Well, I was here through the acquisition of the Douglas family. I was here through all the dog issues. And the one thing I will constantly go back to is, thank God we don't have 200 homes there. I think we have traffic now, 200 homes, it'd be worse. But we do have issues, and we don't have money to maintain it. It is an overly loved park. And any time that we can apply for any kind of resources to make some improvements, I think we're obligated to do that. We talk about having an endowment. It's $500,000. We do not get enough money out of that to make a difference in what needs to be done as far as the management, the vegetative fuels management, the trail preservation. I understand about wanting to keep it the same. The problem is it doesn't stay the same. With all the overuse, it just gets dustier with less vegetation and more issues involved. For years, we've known the asphalt needs to be removed. It doesn't allow for revegetation. It's not a good surface to have in there. It doesn't stand up to any of the issues in the management plan or good open space management. I think we will constantly fight the problems with the neighborhood that we fight and try to solve them. I'm not saying they don't exist. They do, and we need to constantly work on them. I understand that. But I still think we have to go for any kind of help we can get when we look at our city's budget to maintain our open space in a healthy way. And I served on the advisory committee for it for a while, the liaison. You know, we've tried the replantings and all of that, and it's a constant effort to maintain an open space that is as well loved as the Douglas Family Preserve is, and as abused. but it is what we have, and it was bought as, honestly, as a dog park. Let's be honest. We knew when we got it that was the use. That's what the public told us they wanted to keep there. It is what we have. So I strongly support going for this grant. I wish staff all the luck in the world, and I know that they do a great job of writing these. And I look forward to seeing some improvements. As far as the where that trail goes, I assume it's because it is still used as a trail, no matter what. I mean, we can say whatever we want to say about redirecting people. The Douglas Family Preserve is, as the other gentleman said, what people go to kind of do what they want. So I do support it. I think all the improvements, we will consider all the input. I'm glad staff is going tomorrow night. I hope the neighbors show up and discuss where things are going and how that goes out. But as far as the grant itself, as Ms. Fry said, this is a preliminary plan, but I support the grant application.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Cavazos?
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo Commissioner Longstreet's statements. You know, the property does require maintenance. I know there's an endowment. As Ms. Zachary said, you know, that's kind of been neglected. The maintenance has kind of been neglected. And to have a chance to go after $300,000 to do some improvement, I think is, you know, you got to take that opportunity when you can, especially with the short window of the application time. With that being said, would there be a chance, were you to get the grant, would there be a chance to factor in some of the neighborhood ideas? Can we modify the plan as needed to kind of incorporate some of their concerns?
Chair Wiscombe and commissioners, this particular funding source has limited application. It's focused on trail improvements. We certainly have in the past and would in the future continue to dialogue with residents regarding their concerns and needs at the preserve. Some things we can try to pursue. We did do some native habitat restoration. We did sign and encourage people to avoid that loop trail with their dogs. We don't have the resources to place a park ranger there full time, so we realize that there is an impact there. As far as fencing is concerned, that is something that, you know, definitely comes up like over and over again. We can tackle that at some point in the future. I can guarantee it would take a lot of resources just to pursue that, and probably a range of community opinion as to whether that was a good or not so good idea. As far as the location of the trail improvements, like I said before, we are trying to use the existing trail system. We're not building anything new and doing it in a way that minimizes impact to the resources. Whether we'd be able to relocate those improvements elsewhere without triggering a permitting requirement or an environmental document, we'd certainly entertain that discussion for sure. At the same time, we'd have to look at whether we could achieve that within the guidelines of this project. And I'd say this is just one project. This isn't the only thing that we could potentially do there over time. We've talked about sort of reopening the management plan, but it took, I want to say 10 years, 8 years for it to finally get finalized. So reopening that again would be another 10, maybe a 20-year process. But we certainly do entertain concerns and try to respond to them with the neighbors to the extent possible. The traffic and the parking is a key concern for sure. We look for opportunities to address that wherever we can.
Mr. Rincon.
Yeah, I just want to express my opinion. I support this application simply because you're providing access to a trail system to those who normally would not have access to it. To me, that's a worthy cause in any event. And given the situation that is pretty flat up there, I think this is an ideal place where we can actually provide accessibility according to ADA standards, and what an ideal location to do it. So I fully support this application.
Ms. Clark, did you have something?
I would like to echo what you said. We've got many beautiful trails in Santa Barbara, but they are not accessible even for young and fit people. There is steep terrain, there is exposure, there are drop-offs, and the DFP it's a unique situation where people can get out there and experience a trail, natural environment where they can't do it in the front country. It's too steep. And I think we owe our community a stable surface that they can enjoy what more able-bodied people can enjoy. Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Heaton, did you have some? I fully agree. I think this is it's universal access. It's for people that would not otherwise have the opportunity to go to DFP. I'm not convinced that, I don't think the place where the meeting is tomorrow is at the Medcliff entrance. But if you look at the map, you've got several points where you can access this universal trail. It's not that it would be, that map, And so you can see the points where you can access the universal trail, and I'm not sure that the impacts, and they do exist, there's no question about them, the impacts to the neighbors do exist now, but I'm not sure that creation of this trail, it's going to provide, yes, another group of potential users of the trail, but I don't think it's going to inundate the neighborhood with tons of more cars or anything, and certainly there are, I don't think that it's written in stone that the access to the universal trail is at the Medcliff side. It can be at the other place too, from what I understand from the diagrams. But I think we do, as Mr. Rincon said and Ms. Clark said, we owe it to our community to if we have the opportunity, and I hope that we are successful and we do have the opportunity to provide a trail that is a universally accessible trail, that we can do this. So people that are in wheelchairs or have other disabilities that don't allow them to walk the surface of the DFP now can actually get out and enjoy the views that all of us treasure out there. So, yes, Ms. Longstreet.
I'd like to make a motion that the Commission recommend that the Parks and Recreation Department submit a grant to the Recreational Trails Program for the Douglas Family Preserve Trails Restoration Project.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Longstreet and a second by Mr. Rincon. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. That's our last agenda item, and our meeting is adjourned. And thank you all for coming.